So we are holding on Daf Samech Tet, where it says Ul Rebbe Akiva. The first word on the line is Ve'Yisraelit, and then it says Ul Rebbe Akiva. So just to catch up to where we were, in the last Gemara, we made a whole bunch of drashot to teach us about how someone who has bia with someone who's pasul becomes pasul to have truma. So we learned from the pasuk uvat kohen ki tiyeh leish zar, that the concept that if somebody had bia with someone who's asur to them, but that it's a type of relationship that kiddushin would be tofes, right? It's, for example, a mamzer or a natin, a ger of Mitzri, Edomi, etc. Any of those people that kiddushin would be tofes, but they're asur to them, that lady who has bia with such a person becomes pasul to have truma. And if it's a bat kohen, if it's a bat Yisrael or bat Levi, they become pasul to kehuna. That's what we learned. And then we had another pasuk that said bat kohen ki tiyeh almana ugrusha. From that pasuk we learned that if she had bia with a akum, she becomes pasul, even though there's no kiddushin by an akum, and you can't learn it from the first pasuk, you can learn it from that pasuk. So the Gemara is basically going to ask, that works, the first pasuk we learned that someone who has kiddushin on her but is pasul to her makes her pasul. But according to Rabbi Akiva, by chayvei lav, a mamzer, ger, amoni, mitri, etc., those are, the kiddushin is not tofes. So according to Rabbi Akiva, that first pasuk is teaching me everything. Anytime there's bia to a pasul, even if kiddushin is not tofes, then she becomes pisula to have truma. So the question is, why do you need the second pasuk to teach me an akum makes her pasul? And he fits also in the first pasuk. So that's going to be the question of the Gemara. So it says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva, Damar ein kiddushin tofsin b'chayvei lavin. According to Rabbi Akiva, that he holds that kiddushin is not tofes by chayvei lavin. So if a mamzer or any of those people on the list that we had try to be mekadesh lady, it will not work. So therefore, umay ki tiyeh leish zar, what's the pasuk of ki tiyeh leish zar? Ki ti ba'ela. That when anyone has bia, any pasul has bia with a lady, it makes her pisula to have truma and pisula to kiuna. So if that's the case, almana ugrusha lamali, I don't need the pasuk of uvat kohen ki tiyeh almana ugrusha, that second pasuk, to teach me anything more. So the Gemara says, no, you do. That pasuk is coming to teach me just the regular understanding of the pasuk, that if you have someone who was married to you have a bat kohen who was married to Yisrael, and then she became an almana or a grusha, so if she has children, she's not allowed to eat truma. If she doesn't have children, then she goes back to her father's house, she eats truma. That's the other way. No, she's a bat kohen.
Okay, bat kohen.
She married a Yisrael.
Okay.
If she has children from the Yisrael, then that's it. She's does not go back to eating truma when she becomes almana or grusha. If she doesn't have children, then she eats the truma.
You mean the children make her pasul for this one?
Having children from a Yisrael make her not go back to eating truma.
Father.
Yeah. So we need to teach us that this is true by an almana and a grusha. So almana lehachmir aleha. We needed to teach me that this is true if she becomes an almana, to show that even if she, in a case where, in a case where she has children, she's not allowed to go back to eating truma. Ugrusha lahakel alea. And we need the case of grusha to teach me that even though she's a grusha, as long as she doesn't have children, she's still allowed to eat truma. Now the Gemara is going to explain vitzricha. I need to teach both almana and grusha that this is the case. If she has children, she does not go back to her father's home to eat truma. If she does not have children, then she does eat truma. So I needed to teach me that it's true by an almana and a grusha tzricha. Di ashminan almana. If it would have only told me the almana, so almana hu dechiled lezera achla mishum dechazi lekeuna. I would have thought that this is true by almana. When she has no children, she can eat truma because she can marry a kohen also. An almana can marry a kohen, but I would think. Grusha would be different, right? Aval grusha de lo chazi lekeuna, but a grusha that she cannot marry a kohen. Ema afal gav deled lazar lo achla. I would have thought even if she doesn't have children, she cannot eat. So therefore, the Torah needs to tell me no. A grusha also, if she doesn't have children, she can eat truma, even though she cannot marry a kohen, but she can eat truma. Vi ashminan gerusha, and if the Torah would have only said a grusha when she has children she doesn't eat, so grusha hu dechi'it lezera lo achla mishum de lo chazi lekeuna. I would have thought a grusha she cannot marry a kohen, so if she has children she cannot eat truma. Aval almana dechazia lekeuna ema afal gav de'it lazera nami techol. But an almana that she's able to marry a kohen, I might think, even if she has children from the Israel, but she's an almanah, she can marry a kohen, so she's still kasher to have teruma as well, even if she has children. Therefore, I need the Torah to tell me, no, they're both the same. Doesn't matter that a grusha is not allowed to marry a kohen. This has nothing to do with marrying a kohen. If they have children, they don't eat truma. If they don't have children, they eat truma. So tzricha. That's why we needed to teach me both almanah and grusha. Okay, so once we proved now that if anyone has bia with someone who's pasul to them, they become pasul to truma and to keuna. So the Gemara says, "Ve'ema nivla pasul af machzir gerushato." The Gemara says, why don't we say also, case of machzir gerushato would be included. Basically, machzir gerushato is somebody who divorced a woman, and then she was with somebody else, she married somebody else, and got divorced from that person, or that person died, and now the first husband wants to take her back. So that's a case of chayve lavin. So the guy, the original husband, is pasul on this lady now, right? Let's say,
Why pasul on this lady?
Because there's an isur of machzir grushato. He's not allowed to take it for anybody. For anybody. Once she was with, let's say you have a Yisrael.
If she has a relationship with another person.
Yes, she had a relationship with. Yes, the case was she had a relationship with another person. So you have, let's say the case is a bat kohen married a Yisrael. This Yisrael gave her a get, divorced her. She went and married somebody else. That guy also divorced her. Now this first Yisrael, the first husband is pasul on her. So
even the bat Yisrael, the same situation.
Yes, but the question is over here because she can still eat truma now. Right? Because she's a bat kohen, she doesn't have any children, she goes back to her father. Now let's say this guy comes and he has a bia with her. So the it should, according to what we're saying, it should make her pasul, because this guy is pasul to her and he had a bia with her, so it should make her not able to eat truma anymore. But the halacha is that that's not true. The halacha is that that's not true. So the Gemara wants to ask why. Why don't we say this case also that the machzir gerushato would make her pasul? So the Gemara says, you know why? Because what does the pasuk say? Ubat kohen kitiyeh leish zar. So says the Gemara, leish zar amar Rachmana. The Torah says someone who's pasul to her, but who's zar. Zar means they're foreign, they're strange. So amar Rachmana, misha zar etzla mikara, someone who was initially pasul to her. La'afuke hai Delo zar etzla meikara, and it's coming to exclude this case where he's not a zar to her to begin with. He was not pasul to her to begin with. They had a relationship originally. He only became pasul later. So that case is not included. We're talking about only someone who was always pasul to her. So the Gemara says, so Haidelo zar etzla meikara. Okay. So ihachi Halal delav zarhu meikara. I think they take out the word. The Bach takes out the word meikara. Yeah. Ihachi halal delav zarhu. The halal, a halal is not pasul on a bat kohen. Technically, a halal is allowed to marry a bat kohen, right? There's no isur. he's not like a mamzer or one of those gerim, ger, amoni, moavi, edomi, mitzri. He's not like those, because there's no isur. There's no a halal has no isur to be with a bat kohen. So if that's the case, we learned in the pasuk that if someone who has bia, who's pasul on a lady, who has bia with her, that makes her pasul. But halal, that he's not, there's no isur bia over there. So lo lifsol. Why does he make her pasul? Meaning, we're learning from the pasuk that uvat kohen ki tiyeh leish zar, when she has bia with somebody who is a zar, who's pasul on her, that makes her that she cannot have truma anymore. So why is a halal included in that list? He's not a pasul on her. So the Gemara says, Amar Kara, lo yechalel zar'o be'amav. The pasuk says by a kohen gadol. It says, it says almana ugusha zona v'chalala zona et ele lo yikach. He's not allowed to marry a certain woman. And then it says afterwards, lo yechalel zar'o be'amav. So makish zar'o lo. It connects him to his offspring, to his zera. Mahu posel af zaro nami posel. The same way that if the kohen gadol is together with an almana or with a grusha, he's going to be posel her. He makes her a halala. So the same way that he's posel, his zera, basically a halal, is also posel. So we learned from this pasuk that a halal is posel a lady, from the fact that it connects Kohen Gadol to his zera. The same way that if a Kohen Gadol is with one of the ladies that's forbidden to him, it makes her pasul. So too, if a halal is with a lady, he makes her pasul, even though he's not forbidden. So the Gemara says, Ve'ema mishat havaya. Okay, so the Gemara says, why don't we say this whole thing, ki tiyeh leish zar, that if they have bia, it becomes pasul? It's really not talking about from the time of bia. It's talking about from the time of kiddushin. That if somebody once they give kiddushin, the pasul gives kiddushin to this lady, then she becomes pisula, even before there's a bia. Why don't we say that? So the Gemara says, Dumya de Kohen Gadol ba'almana. No, it's the same way that a Kohen Gadol is posel and almana. Ma Kohen Gadol ba'almana bebia. The same way that a Kohen Gadol, he's posel the almana. How? When they have bia, with bia. So af hainami bebia. So this also, this case of anyone who's posel a lady from Truma, that we learn from the pasuk of ki tiyeh leish zar, that's talking about bia, not talking about havaya of marriage, of kiddushin. So the Gemara says, okay, ve'ema dika havaya u bia. Maybe you need both. Maybe you need kiddushin and bia, because it says ki tiyeh leish zar. So maybe that's what makes her pasul. So the Gemara says, no, dumya de kohen gadol ba'almana. It's the same the way that a kohen gadol makes an almana pasul to truma. Ma kohen gadol ba'almana bebia lechuda. Afainami bebia lechuda. The same way that a kohen gadol, if you have an almana who's eating truma and a kohen gadol has bia with her, he makes her pasul just by the bia, even with no kiddushin. So too everything else that we're learning from the pasuk of ki tiyeh leish zar, right? That if someone has bia with a lady, someone who's pasul has bia with a lady, makes her pasul. That's also only bia, no kiddushin. Just the same way that a kohen gadol is posel and almana. Okay, so now the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi Omer. So this goes back to the original Braita that we quoted, right? We had a Braita. The Braita brought three opinions. First opinion was what we were going with until now. That anyone who has bia with somebody who is pasul, so that lady becomes pasul to kehuna and she cannot have truma. The way Rabbi Yossi said a little bit different. Rabbi Yossi said, Kol shezaro pasul, posel. Anyone who their offspring is going to be pasul, then they'll make the lady pasul. So that's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. So for Rabbi Yossi Omer, Kol shezaro pasul, posel. That was Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Anyone who their offspring, their children are going to be pasul, if they have bia with this lady, they'll make her pasul. V'chol she'en zaro posel, pasul, eno posel. But anyone who...
Are the Kohen is going to be pasul from Kahana?
A Kohen who has the status of a Kohen will not lose it. Meaning, if he has a bia with someone who's pasul, he doesn't lose. He doesn't not become. He doesn't become a halal or anything. The children will be a halal, but he is not.
It says could go to the Khan and everything. Huh?
Technically,
there's no punishment for him.
There's no. I mean, it could be midioraita. Yes, midioraita. He's allowed to, thing. But there is a Kohen Avarian who's over. They don't let him do these things. They don't let him do the avodah and duchan and whatever. Okay, but either way, so that's Rabbi Yossi's opinion. And kol she'en zar o pasul, eno posel. Anyone who their offspring is not pasul, they are not going to be posel. They're not going to make a lady pasul if they have bia with her. So the Gemara says, Ma'ika ben Tanakama le Rabbi Yossi. What's the difference between the first opinion, the Tanakama, that said if someone pasul has bia with this lady, she becomes pisula tekuna, and Rabbi Yossi who says, if their child is pasul, then they'll make the lady pasul. So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzri sheni ve'edomi sheni ika benayhu. So the difference between Rabbi Yossi and Tanakama is Mitzri sheni and Edomi sheni. Basically, the Torah says that a ger Mitzri is not allowed to marry into the kahal. A ger Mitzri cannot take a bat Yisrael or any. So a ger Mitzri cannot take a bat Yisrael. We are holding. If you want to join us, we're holding by Samech Tet towards the bottom where it says. Ika benayhu. Yeah, it's Samach Tanam Rav, Ika benayhu. So we're discussing over here a few opinions of what makes a lady pasul to have truma or to marry a kohen. So one of them, Tanakama, said anytime she has bia, any intercourse with anyone who's pasul on her, she becomes pasul. Rabbi Yossi said a little bit different. He said that kol shezar o pasul posel. Anytime someone's offspring would become pasul, so if he has bia with a lady, then he'll make her pasul. So the Gemara is asking what's the difference between those two. So Ma'ika ben Tanakam Rabbi Yossi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mitzri sheni ve'edomi sheni ika benayhu. So the difference would be second generation Mitzri and Edomi. So the Torah says that a Mitzri who converts, who's a ger, is not allowed to marry into the kahal. They're pasul to marry into the kahal. They're asur to marry into the kahal. Now, that's only up to the third generation. Third generation says dor shlishi yavo lahen. They're allowed to marry. So they have to marry among themselves or other people who they're allowed to marry that are not considered in the kahal. And the third generation they could marry. So now, let's say you have a second generation ger mitzri. So his child is not going to be pasul. He himself is asur to marry this bat Yisrael or bat Kohen or whatever it is. So if he has bia with her, according to Tanakama, according to the first opinion, so he would make her pasul. According to the second opinion, his child is going to be kasher. So he won't make her pasul, according to Rabbi Yossi. So this is the nafkami. This case would be the difference. According to Tanakama, the second generation Mitzri, since he himself is pasul, and if he has bia with a lady, he'll make her pasul to keuna and to eating truma if she's a bat kohen. But according to Rabbi Yossi, since his child is not going to be pasul, he's not going to make her pasul. So shnehem lo limdua ella mikohen gadol ba'almana, and they're both coming from the same source. They're both learning from the case of a kohen gadol who's together with an almana who makes her pasul. Right? If you have an almana who is a bat kohen who's eating truma, and the kohen gadol is with her, or a kohen and a grusha, it's the same thing. So she doesn't eat truma anymore. So Tanakama savar ma kohen gadol ba'almana shebiato ba'avera uposel. What's just like by a kohen gadol to an almana, that bia is a bia of avera. And that's what makes her pasul. So avhai nami posel. So this guy also, this second generation Mitzri, if he has bia with a lady, the bia is a bia of avera. Therefore, it should make her pasul. Rabbi Yossi Savar, Rabbi Yossi learns differently. He says, Ke Kohen Gadol, it's like a Kohen Gadol, this second generation Mitzri. Ma Kohen Gadol shezaro pasul uposel, of course shezaro pasul posel. It says just like by a Kohen Gadol, if he has a child with this lady, it's going to be a halal. So he makes the lady a halala. But a ger Mitzri, if he has a child, it's going to be a complete kasher. So it's not going to make her Pisula. La fuke mitzri sheni, and according to Rabbi Yossi, this is coming to exclude a second generation mitzri de'en zaro pasul, that his zera is not pasul. Dichtiv banim asher yuledu lahem dor shlishi yavo lahem b'kal Hashem. It says banim asher yivaledu lahem, that if any children that they have of the after the second generation, dor shlishi, or the third generation, yavo lahem b'kal Hashem, they're kasher. They're allowed to marry into the kahal. Okay, that was the first two opinions. We had a third opinion. Right, the first opinion was anytime a lady has bia with someone who is pasul on her, is one of the psulim basically, she becomes pasul to keuna. Right, nivela la pasula. She has bia with somebody who is not allowed to have bia with her, so she becomes pasul. That was the first opinion. That was Tanakama. Rabbi Yossi said not always true. It depends. If it's somebody whose children are kasher, then it won't make her pasul, even if he himself is pasul. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel omer, kol she'ata noseh bitu ata noseh al menuto. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said, anyone whose daughter you're allowed to marry their almana. Meaning, he'll only be posel the lady if his daughter is, if his son is going to be pasul. I'm sorry, if his daughter is going to be pasul. So, the Gemara is going to explain what he means. But what he's saying is, anytime the daughter is pasul, that's when he's going to make the lady pasul with his bia.
You said mutar.
Yeah, if the daughter is kasher. If the daughter is kshera, then he won't make the lady pasul with bia. So, if this person's daughter is going to be kasher, even though his sons will be pasul, so he will not make the lady that he's with a halala, and she doesn't become pisula. So what's going to be this case? So the Gemara is going to explain. So, my ika ben Rabbi Yossi Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. What would be a case, a practical case, that would be a difference between Rabbi Yossi and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel? Again, Rabbi Yossi said a second generation Mitzri whose children are Kesherim, so that he won't make a lady pasul if he has bia with her. What about Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel? What is he saying with the, if you're allowed to marry their daughter, you're allowed to marry the almana? So, Amar Ula, Ger Amoni Moavi Ika Benaihu. A nafkamina between them would be Ger Amoni and Moavi. Ushnehem lo limdua ella mikohen gadol be'almana. And both are learning from Kohen Gadol to Almana. Rabbi Yossi Savar, Ma Kohen Gadol be'almana shezar'o pasul uposel. Rabbi Yossi says, just like a Kohen Gadol who marries an almana, his children from her would be pasul, so he makes her pasul. So av kol shezar'o pasul posel, so too Amoni, Ger Amoni or Moavi, that their sons are going to be pisulim, they're going to make this lady pasul. But Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Savar, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, he learns that Ma Kohen Gadol Ba'almana Shekol Zaro Pasul Uposel, a Kohen Gadol to an Almana, if he has children, whether he has sons or daughters, they're psulim, they're chalalim. Right? If he has a daughter, it's a chalala. If he has a son, it's a halal. So af shekol zaro pasul uposel. So too, someone who's all their offspring will become pasul, they'll be posel. La'afuke Amoni u Moavi, this is coming to exclude an Amoni and Moavi, de'en kol zar'o pasul. Not all of their zera is pasul. Now what does that mean? Da'amar mar, Amoni velo Amonit. Moavi v'lo Moavit. We're gonna have, actually, it's later on in this Masechet, famous story about David HaMelech. There was a big debate whether David HaMelech was allowed to become Melech, and you forget about even become Melech. They were saying he's even pasul to the Kahal because he came from Ruth HaMoaviyah. And we know the pasuk says an Ammoni and a Moavi is not allowed to enter Kahal Yisrael. So Ruth was Moaviyah. How could she enter Kahal Yisrael? So the Gemara came to the final conclusion that Moavi velo Moavit, right? Ammoni velo Ammoni, Moavi velo Moaviyah, right? So the females were allowed to enter. Therefore, there was no isur. So that would be the nafkamina. Rabban Shimon Gamliel would say that anyone who's all of their children would be pasul, whether boys and girls, then they'll make the lady a pasul, but that's excluding Ger, Ammoni, and Moavi, that if their daughters would be ksherim to Israel, so they would not make a lady pasul if they have bia with her.
Why was it even a